Hello, Clifton Hill family. Welcome to an exciting new project, Sideline at the Quarries, presented by FC Clifton Hill. And it's brought to you by Nelson Alexander, a real estate icon in Melbourne's north that has been helping people sell, buy and rent and lease properties in Melbourne's northern suburbs for more than 45 years. My name's Teo Pellizzeri. It's a pleasure to host this program. We're going to be having an exciting series of chats with different figures in the football community, many, if not all of whom, will have some ties back to FC Clifton Hill. So that's really going to tie in nicely as we go around the world of football and speak to a range of interesting and different people. Of course, speaking of Nelson Alexander, Robbie Ennis, the former Socceroo, is a very successful auctioneer at Nelson Alexander and a former player of FC Clifton Hill over 5 seasons after returning from his career in England with Portsmouth. And of course, another broadcast partner of this presentation is Tradie Marketing, apparel and promotions company specialising in the trade industry, owned by Vicky Govic, and the Govic family are a big part of the club. All right, so that's the project. Let's go to our very first guest, and it is one of Australia's best football exports at the moment, although he is a bit closer to home than perhaps he would like to be if not for the COVID-19 situation. And of course, I speak of the Arsenal Women's FC coach, Australian and Melburnian Joe Montemurro. Joe, it's a pleasure to have you as our first guest on Sideline at the Quarries.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Teo. Beautiful, but I'm just a Clifton Hill boy, so we'll leave it at that. No world status here, mate.
Well, before we get into your connections to Clifton Hill, you're in Melbourne at the moment. Obviously, all of professional football, until at least this weekend, is in shutdown. We're not going to spend too long on it. Just you're in Melbourne now. How are you handling it, and how are you looking forward to getting back to the UK and resuming your work?
Yeah, some interesting questions. As simple as they are, they're a little bit tricky. I mean, obviously, great to be back and spending time with the family and being at home. Obviously, the reports from all around the world. It's an interesting time at the moment, but good to be safe at home and obviously with the family and spending the time with the family, which is a bonus for me. And listening from afar, obviously the UK is going through a difficult time at the moment, but we're keeping in touch with what's happening, which is the most important thing. And to be honest, in terms of the resumption of football and when we're going back, it's still very much up in the air, and we're not sure where it's going to go from here.
We'll come back and we'll touch on your time at Arsenal and in the UK as part of our chat. But I want to start with something far closer to where you call home. And if you were back in Melbourne under regular circumstances on Saturday afternoon at about 3 p.m, one might expect to actually see you out at Quarries Reserve. And I understand that when you are in Melbourne during the winter, that is where you tend to head out to on a weekend if you want your football fix.
Well, look, you on a Saturday afternoon, on a winter Saturday afternoon, you can't avoid the beautiful smell of the souvlaki coming from Quarries Park. So it just attracts you. It attracts you down there, and look, I think it's great for me to keep connecting with the club and obviously the opportunity to go down and support what I believe is an organisation and many organisations like that that have contributed to grassroots and community football. So I'm always happy to, when I've got the opportunity, when I am in Melbourne, to definitely go down and watch Clifton Hill.
And you are quite big on where you came from. In all my discussions with you about football, you've always been really authentic about being from Melbourne and sort of acknowledging, where you came from and your journey through football. And I understand that the current president of FC Clifton Hill, Michael Torricos, was one of your neighbours across the road in Westgarth Street growing up.
Yeah, he prompted that question, didn't he? He wanted a plug. So, but look, Michael and myself go back a long way. Obviously, lived across the road in Westgarth Street, Northcote, for anyone who knows the area. Look, our favourite haunt was the church next door to my house and across the road from his house, where there'd be a lot of one-on-ones and a lot of 2v2s, and I made sure that he was in goal, and I'd plummet some shots past him. So we had a lot of fun, and I think you touched on something really, really important. It was an amazing way to grow up with a great neighbourhood and a great bunch of people in the area, and I've always stayed very close to my area and my grassroots growing up, and to have great people around me and great neighbours like Michael and the family is just a bonus. So I cherish those days. That they were amazing days, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Now, a lot of sporting media is doing retrospectives at the moment because there's nothing new to talk about. Everyone's looking backwards rather than looking forwards. And do you find yourself with the time that you may have spare reminiscing about your journey and your career? Does anything stick in your mind that you've wandered back to as part of having a bit of extra time off? Or are you able to compartmentalise it a bit and only ever look forward? How have you approached the current shutdown of all sport?
Look, my human nature is always looking forward and always looking at improving and being better. And but to do that, you obviously have to look back and see what you are doing and retrospectively, assess your practices and how you're going about things. So to go forward, you need to appreciate and respect what you've done. But I probably, a lot of the thinking and a few of the questions that I've been asked in media of the time was probably the coaching journey. And, obviously we don't have a great sort of football, or not a great football culture, but an embedded football culture such as AFL and rugby. So we have to fight for our little position in the sporting landscape in Australia, and I think that makes us resilient. That makes us strong as characters and strong as people and who we are. And it's something that I think we've probably lost a little bit of as an Australian sort of cultural sporting landscape. So I think all the looking back has been the journey and how important the journey was to fight for your little notoriety as a sport within our landscape. So, and as I said, I think it's something that we, should cherish as in the sporting culture and the sporting landscape, but also, the great contribution that a club like Clifton Hill and so many other clubs that have made to the game here. I think sometimes we forget the amazing contribution that they've made to the game.
Now, there are clubs that are always going to feel like home, and then there are places in football where you're only ever passing through. You've been at Arsenal since November 2017 now, though. In a high-pressure, professional football environment, you're only ever a few bad results away from trouble. Have you had the comfort to let it feel like home yet, given that you are more than 2.5 years into the role? Do you feel like it's yours, or is it always that edge of knowing that, if you don't perform, if your next game doesn't go well, you're always going to be on edge and needing to push yourself to make sure that you stay at your sharpest?
Yeah, good question. I think when you sign up to be in a high pressure, high performance environment, you're one game or a few negative results away from possibility losing your position or losing your job. I think, look, I've been very, very lucky and privileged, obviously, to have been at the clubs that I've been at. But I think a lot of them, I've been able to sort of jump in with a mentality of a project more than an actual sort of, we've got to win straight away sort of scenario. So, Melbourne City was one, but Arsenal was another. Arsenal definitely was one that was approached on the proviso that we had to instill a level of integrity and respect to the identity of the group, and bring it back to where it should be in terms of its style, and then to start putting a bit of sustainability in terms of being competitive and being at the upper echelons of English football and now European football. So am I feeling the pressure? you always feel pressure because you want to be better. And I probably put pressure more on myself than what the club give me, than what the club put me under. But it's about just obviously assessing what you're doing and making sure that you're extracting everything positive that you can out of the situation that you've got. And I don't take one day for granted. I'm lucky and privileged that I get the opportunity to go to a great club and be part of it and make sure that every opportunity is taken with the positivity and the optimism that I always bring to the game.
How have you found what it may have done in terms of how you manage your own reputation and conduct? And by that I mean you've come from Victorian Premier League environment. Then you've had a bit of time at a semi-professional level in the W League, but at least you're on national television, even though the season only runs for a couple of months. And your time at Arsenal has coincided with a really extraordinary explosion of professional women's football in the UK. The United States was seen as a benchmark, and then the England national team has done a lot of great things, and the English Women's League has done a lot as a result, and also the media covering it has exploded too. So has football become, in a sense, far more about not just what happens on the pitch, but making sure that you're on the clock 24 hours a day, that every comment you make, every public appearance that you make, even the company you keep, they're all things that could be under scrutiny now, the same way that, say, if Jose Mourinho was seen out at dinner, or if Arsene Wenger had done something as the men's boss or said something, it would be scrutinised. How have you managed to adjust how you conduct yourself in order to deal with perhaps the massive increase in exposure, but also the ramifications and analysis that will come with what you do and what you say?
Yeah, look, I've had to adapt, and again, it's the same as when you get into the coaching domain. You have to take the growing expectations that are on you and on your persona and on your image as a person. And look, I think the reality of all this is that is to be genuine, is to be as humble and as honest as you can. And I've always sort of been one to sort of say things from a point of I suppose knowledge and strength. I've never been one to speculate, and never been one to have opinions when I don't have the information to back up that opinion. So I think the important thing for me is to make sure that I come across in a genuine way, make sure that I come across in a humble way, but more importantly, make sure I come across in an honest and way that doesn't speak negatively in the domain. And I think that's important. I think that's really, really important because in the end, I'm the reflection of the club, and I represent the identity and the brand and the DNA of the organisation that employ me. But more importantly, my players represent me on the pitch. So it's very, very important that those values and those those levels of integrity are the staple diet and are the benchmark and the platform that we believe is part of our DNA at Arsenal. So yeah, you have to adapt, but I think you also have to be genuine and be true to yourself and who you are. And as I opened up this conversation, I'm just a boy who was born in Northcote, live in Clifton Hill, and I love football, and I'm honoured and blessed to be involved at the level that I am, and hope that. When it does happen eventually that I don't have a job at Arsenal, that I've left the place in a better state.
Well, I wanted to ask about Arsenal because when you took the job, Arsenal was still a legacy of women's football in England. Manchester United were only just starting a team in a lower division, having to win promotion. Liverpool being bottom of the league and not letting their women use the same facilities as the men is a regular headline that I see pop up on Twitter in conversation about where women's football stands in the UK on a regular basis. Juventus started a team. There's pressure on Real Madrid to start a team. It seems as though Arsenal were 10 to 15 years ahead of the curve on this. and the rest of Europe and some of those big names are starting to catch up. What's your perception been living in that environment where you know that you've got to scout these teams because you might be playing them in the Champions League, or you might be signing or trialling players or selling players to those teams? So you'd have a good understanding of the landscape. But even in the 2.5, 3 years that you've been at the club, how has it changed since you got in the door?
Yeah, look, it's. I think the reality for me is we can talk about, clubs investing. We can talk about the explosion of women's football. We can talk about the amazing World Cup and obviously Arsenal. We've got 34 years of history. Having won over 51 trophies. We are the only English team to have won the UEFA Champions League. But all that is all relative to the product on the park, and what I'm seeing is just amazing football. It's really difficult now to take your eye off a women's game on football on television, because it's such a good brand of football, and I think that has to always underpin everything we do. We will get big crowds. We'll be paying in the big stadiums. We'll have bigger investment in the game. That will happen. We'll have massive broadcasting. That will happen. But it's all deemed on the product on the park. And if the product on the park isn't to the level that is pleasing, that is exciting, that people want to go and see, well, then we can pretend as much as we want and throw as much money as we want to the product. Again, there will be investment, because the clubs are now seeing the value and the importance and the parity of the brand of football, and how important these players are as role models. And I think that has to be the staple understanding of the growth of the game. Let's not lose sight of the game. And, because as I said, sometimes we can facade it with playing in good stadiums and, money or whatever you want, but the game has to be the winner, and that's the most important thing. And that's why I really am honoured to be part of a club that has a brand that it wants to play. It's important that it plays an exciting brand of football, an attacking brand of football, and to be part of that is crucial.
One thing I wanted to ask about with regards to the actual football on the field was the demographic of your squad, because when you were in Australia, you were coaching W League teams which skew very young. You also had a role with NTC, which is obviously teenage players. Now you've got players who, for lack of a better word, are the finished article. We're talking about Kim Little and Danielle van der Donk and Vivian Miedema, even Caitlin Ford, players in their mid to late 20s who have reached physical and, in a sense, footballing mental maturity. How much has that changed the way you go about your coaching, though, coming from an environment where players are still learning the game, as opposed to a different environment where these are players who, I'm not saying they've learned everything there is to learn. I'm sure many of them are still trying to learn. But how different is it to when you were coaching a different demographic of players?
Look, it's part of our coaching. Part of our coaching is about adaptation. And in the coaching domain as a player, I don't think the finished article or the ability to learn and develop, there's no end point to that. It's constant. It constantly evolves. And the reality of coaching nowadays is relationships. The reality of coaching nowadays is making sure that you find a medium between the high achievers, the ones that might be a little bit more difficult at training scenarios. So you've just got to find that. You've got to find that balance, and you find that balance within the belief of what you're doing, and then obviously being able to to make that belief be translated to the culture that you want to instill within your group. So I think like anything, you have to be adaptable and flexible to the changing landscape. But more importantly, you still have to make sure that your beliefs are brought across in a way where it makes sense to the group. And I think just finding that balance is really, really important. But I love the what's the word, the challenge of working with, obviously players that have main notoriety. But the funny thing is that these players have a thirst to learn, and that's why they are the best in the world, because they want to be better. They're not happy with just being Vivian Miedema, who's one of the best strikers in the world, or Kim Little, who's one of the best midfielders in the world. And, they want to be better. And that's what I love about what I do, is that you can always instill some level of improvement in these players.
When it comes to recruiting and scouting of players and bolstering your squad and the general turnover of players, do you have a hands-on role in that? Do you have a scouting team that you can delegate to? Obviously, signing Caitlin Ford was a big deal in Australia because there wasn't really a relationship between Arsenal and Matilda's players. It was quite exciting to have an Australian go there. But even signing Jill Roord before the World Cup, which looked like a great signing because she then had a really good World Cup. So the club may have been quite shrewd in that acquisition, as it might have been a lot harder to get her signature after the tournament. But how does that work, and how big a role do you play, and how big a role does sort of the club as a collective play in the recruitment and scouting of players?
Yeah, we have a pretty extensive scouting network, and effectively we have people pretty much in Europe that we can call upon and look at. But we're very strategic, and what I mean by that is that we're very clear in what we want, and that clarity comes from A, the methodology and philosophy of the style we want to play, and B, how we translate that philosophy on the park. So I suppose our player profiling in what we want for the specific areas is very, very particular and very detailed. I have a hands-on sort of, I suppose, role with the analyst. We have specific analysts for the women's game, but we have one that just works on scouting and looking at succession playing. The biggest one is we have a lot of list management discussions. So once a month, and usually in an international break, where we're always pre-planning probably 18 months to 2 years ahead on who's coming forward, and where we think we need to strengthen, and where we think we're having a succession planning. Age is very, very important. We don't want to be too top heavy, and we don't want to be too light in terms of the age brackets. So that's always spread in terms of knowing that players are coming out. Older players might be coming towards the end of their contract, and we want to make sure that we've already got that succession planning happening. So there's a lot involved. And we have obviously a lot of the data, statistical data, to profile players that can give us the I suppose the prerequisites that we need to bring in players going forward. Yeah, so scouting's fundamental, obviously, with a growing game, and obviously the quality of players that are out there, and even more importantly throughout our academy. I mean, obviously we're looking at the processes going forward in terms of who are the younger local players that we believe could be players at Arsenal, and we're doing a lot of work with actually our boys' academy. So we've got a lot of the girls in the 10, 11, and 12 age bracket that are working with our boys' academy.
I wanted to ask you a bit of a bigger picture question about the women's game in Australia, because when you signed Caitlin Ford, it was mid-season for the W League. Chloe Lagazzo left to go to Bristol under similar circumstances, and by the time the semi-final weekend had rolled around, Ellie Carpenter, Steph Catley, Lydia Williams, they were all subject to transfer rumours about not going back to the USA but going to Europe and the UK, and there was a real feeling that there was an exodus of Australian players going on. And now COVID, moving the Olympics, it's all thrown everything back up in the air, because all of a sudden playing W League this coming summer might be a bit more attractive to Australians because there's an Olympics off the back of it. They'll be back under everyone's nose. But of course, pro-European football is also very attractive, and we don't know how it's going to recover and how it's going to bounce back. But did you have any overarching thoughts on the direction the W League was going and the purpose that it served before COVID hit? Because I was looking at it saying, I think there's a future for this league without the Matildas. It's just going to take a rethink on how it presents and packages itself. Although I'm sure others would have said, this league still really needs Matildas. Even if we can't have Sam Kerr, we still need as many as possible in order to be able to sell and market the league. So what were your perceptions from afar on the purpose that the competition was serving, especially given that there was a bit of an exodus of Matildas going on?
Yeah, look, it's definitely a situation at the moment where we've really got to look at the W League and its benefit and where it's heading, and especially now that the reality of the competition is Europe, and the European leagues are more closely aligned with, I don't know if it's the right word, with the realities of football, where you sign a contract over a 2-3 year period or 4-year period, whatever it is, and you have June off, and then you're back into pre-season July and August, and you play from September to May. That's the realities of football that I think the game is heading, and that's the realities of football that's that if we want to start bridging the gap and getting to that level, we have to adhere to. Where and how does the W League fit in there? That's probably the biggest question we need to ask. I mean, one of my, and I'm not sitting here taking credit of, that I should be doing or what I've done and all that sort of stuff. But one of the questions I posed in the first probably 2 years at Melbourne City in the W League was the importance of making the program a 12-month of the year program. Now, whether that was it goes to a regional league or a state league that then you have a playoff of the bigger clubs, I don't know, coming out of the W League. But until we can pretend, that we play 12 games and then you have a final series or whatever it is, has value because we like that. But the reality is that now we are competing with programs that are running 12 months of the year, and that's where I think we need to find where we fit into that landscape. Does the W League serve a purpose? Absolutely. It's very, very important for the football landscape. Do we need to align it more with Asia? Do we have to say, okay, well, maybe we need to go to a winter competition which is aligned with Asia, which may bring the exodus of players that are more, in line to the Japanese and Korean leagues and so on and so on. That might be a way to go. It can be extended from that perspective. I'm not sure, but I'm sure everyone sort of listening to this is saying, well, where's the economic reality of that? Where's that all coming from? They're just things that we need to start really planning, because our female players are going to look for the best contract around the world. A, because they deserve it. B, because they're good enough. And C, because they want to be involved at the highest level possible. So that's a reality that we've got to face, and we've got to be creative with that challenge. But more importantly, we've got to decide on something and stick to it and do it to the best of our ability.
And when it comes to where the professional game is evolving to in Europe, I know that COVID's hit everything pretty hard, but are you currently working under the impression that everything is going to resume, and the expectations of staffing, of facilities, of freedom of movement, at some point or another, it's going to return to the point where you can have a Women's Champions League, you can have a league season, maybe crowds might take a bit longer, there might be an extended period of games behind closed doors, but is your expectation and your planning based around women's European football is going to bounce back to what it was before the shutdown?
Look, there is going to be massive levels of compromise, and even if we try to reduce the games within a confined period of a month or 2 months or whatever it is, and it goes over the summer period, it's going to be compromised. It's going to be a little bit, again, I don't know if this is the right word, a little bit false, and we need to assess whether, okay, is it worth just getting this done for the sake of getting it done, as opposed to the bigger questions of compromised leagues going forward. There's discussions that the WSL may resume around the July, August area, which will then go into September, October. The mandate from UEFA is that we have to have 4 weeks off. So we're looking at a WSL that could potentially, if they do start this season, if they do continue this season, that could start in December. What's that going to look like in terms of cramming the season to finish it before the Olympics? Undoubtedly the mental health and undoubtedly the physical health of players is going to be compromised. So the question is, yes, there is going to be compromise if we want to get it going, but is that compromise going to be to the detriment of the next season, the lead up to the Olympics, the lead up to the Euros in 22, because there will be compromise, I think, for the next 2 or 3 years. It has hurt the leagues. It has hurt. I think the football landscape. But I just keep going back to the fact that the players are the ones that need to decide whether they're comfortable going back. The players are the ones that are going to be out there in the firing line. And they need to be safe and comfortable in going back to it. And at this stage, I can say that there's a big question mark on that.
I'll change pace now. I wanted to ask you about being an Australian coach abroad. You may not be able to consume as much Australian media from overseas as we can here in Australia, but Ange Postecoglou has very much become a bit of an Australian sporting ambassador from his current role in Japan. He still appears quite prominently on a lot of Australian media platforms. Obviously, his success has allowed him to parlay that into, real, this authenticity, having, succeeded at club level off the back of his great international tenure with the Socceroos, and then, of course, NSL prior to that. So do you yourself, having won trophies in the English game, having won trophies in Australia, do you feel as though you are a bit of a flag bearer and a bit of an ambassador for Australian coaches in Europe, given that you're arguably second only to Ange Postecoglou in terms of profile of club management, maybe arguably Kevin Muscat in his new role in Belgium, but he's got to get his feet under the desk there and get the season restarted. So how have you seen your role sort of representing the brand of Australian coaching in Europe?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's. I thank you that you put me in the same sentences and paragraphs of some great coaches. I don't allude to be anywhere near Ange Postecoglou or Kevin Muscat. They are great coaches and have done amazing work. I suppose I can only do the best what I can in my role, and I think that the most outstanding or the noted thing out of all this is that we sometimes, as Australian coaches and people working in the game in Australia, sometimes put ourselves down and believe that maybe we're not good enough, or maybe we just can't reach those levels. So I'd like to think that hopefully, my story, whether it's successful or not, or whether it's enticing or not, or interesting or not, just comes out and says that, hey, we are doing some good things in Australia. We are doing some things that are positive, in not just in the local landscape, but in the European landscape, and why not being able to translate on a local scale. I think sometimes we forget about the good things that we do and some of the positive things that we do really, really well, and we lose sight of that and focus on more what we can't do. So hopefully my story, at whatever level, does have a little bit of an impact on the fact that we have got some good people in this country doing some great things on a world scale.
Now, I'm going to preface this by saying I don't want this to be a gotcha question, okay? I'm just going to warn you that, don't interpret this as a gotcha. When it was announced that Phil Neville wasn't continuing on as England manager, did you dare to imagine yourself in a tracksuit with the 3 lions on the crest?
Not at all. Not at all.
No,
not even. Not at all. No. There are some fantastic coaches in the UK, and there are some fantastic coaches on the world scale that would definitely be ahead of me before they even think about me in that role. So no, not even thinking about that. I mean, I don't think about things that are not there, Teo. It's all great, media speculation and so on, and it's all flattering and so on. But the truth is that there's no offer. There's no, what's the word? There's not even any, process happening. So no.
No, fair enough. And I know that, of course, Tom Sermanni did get a brief spell in charge of the USA team. So you never say never, but I suppose you're in one of the top jobs in world football, and when you're in one of them, I imagine that your mind wouldn't need to stray to anywhere else, would it?
No, as I said, I'm very focused on where I'm at. I'm loving it. We're still probably, I think we're still about 18 months away from where, in terms of the planning and project when I took the job, where we want to be. And the exciting thing about being at Arsenal is that you're doing it with the game flourishing and the game growing and expanding, and it's just an exciting time to be at Arsenal and both in the women's game.
All right, I'm going to just ask a couple of quick hitters to finish. First training session or first team meeting when you get your Arsenal team back, what's the message going to be? Are you the type that's going to come in with a theme or some sort of a tone, or are you going to wait and see what the environment is like before you open your mouth and give that first team address?
We are going to have the biggest dinner get together with lots of food. That's going to be the first thing, just to get everyone back smiling. I just want everyone back smiling and happy, and happy to be back. And I'm sure that in this period they've missed the game. I think a lot of them have sort of stepped back and said, this is why I love football, and this is why we do what we do, and we love it. So I think they've all found a love for the game and are all itching to get back. There's that, and then we're going to have because they obviously in meetings with them every week and speaking with a lot of the players and staff every week. There's going to be that first session is going to be something quite amazing, especially we call it rondo or the Sheva or whatever you want to call it. So it's going to be quite amazing because I join in too, by the way. So.
What do you hope to see the Matildas achieve, assuming the Olympics goes ahead in 2021? What should their ambition be off the back of a disappointing World Cup?
Are you asking where should they finish, or where?
Or just what sort of goal or what sort of ambition should they have, given that a lot of the tone heading into the World Cup was Australia as a contender we can win? Is it time to pump the brakes, or is it time to stay that ambitious about an Olympics?
Oh, look, it's one of those where we don't know how the team is going to be, at what shape or form the team is going to be in at that time. New coach, I assume, or whatever happens from that perspective in terms of the selection, where they want to be. Is it time for a reboot? Is it time for a cycle of change? But I think the important thing we need to know is that it's an amazing brand in terms of not just in women's football, but in terms of I think in as a general sporting brand across all the domains. It's an amazing product, and I just want to think that hopefully it always goes in and represents the country with integrity, with joy. And at the level that's we know it should be, where it should be in the top 10 in the world, and it should be thereabouts. But it's hard to say at this stage because of the uncertainty of where the direction of the Matildas is going to be, and where they want it, where the team will take shape and where they want it to go. But as I said, it's an amazing brand, and I'm sure that it'll always represent itself with an amazing reputation and integrity and the sporting product that it should be.
And just to bring it back a bit closer to home, even more so, tell me your best memory of a game at the Quarries, whether it was due to the game itself, the opponent, what happened that day. Does anything stick in your mind when you automatically have to refer back to a good memory there? Which one jumps to the front of your memory?
No, I think if anyone sits or gets to the northern side of Quarries Park, I think the biggest entertainment is watching Michael Tarikos doing laps and his comments towards certain officials and people. And the biggest one is when a ball goes over the other side to make sure that ball comes back. I think apart from the amazing scenario of being at Quarries Park, because it's obviously close to home and a lot of friends and people are there. I think just being around there and being part of it and is fantastic. So I only have the utmost respect for all the local clubs and obviously especially Clifton Hill, because it's a club close to my heart.
Well, Joe, thank you for your time. All the best getting football back on track, hopefully sooner rather than later, and may your coaching journey continue.
Thanks, Teo, and nice catching up with you. And congratulations on the great stuff you've done too. I listened to the games on BT Sport and watch them in the UK. So long may it continue.
So big thanks to Joe Montemurro there, the coach of Arsenal FC Women's. And that was our first chat as part of Sideline at the Quarries, presented by FC Clifton Hill. And of course, broadcast partnered with Nelson Alexander, the real estate icon in Melbourne's north, helping people buy, sell, rent and lease properties in Melbourne's northern suburbs for 45 years. And also for tradie marketing, apparel and promotions company specialising in the trade industry. That's it. Thank you for your time, FC Clifton Hill family. My name's Teo Pellizzeri, and we look forward to seeing you for the next edition.